Hello again. Welcome to First Christian Church Adult Fellowship Bible Study. And we continue in our study of First Maccabees. This is our lesson number 10 in chapter 10, be from chapter 10 of First Maccabees. We'll only cover the first 66 verses of that chapter. It's a long chapter. Chapter 10 takes up about 5 years after the end of chapter 9. During that period, scholars tell us there was during that 5 year period where nothing's being said, was a relatively stable area in Judea relative to external influences, not internal. However, there was still considerable religious conflict going on amongst the various groups of the Jews. Again, keep in mind the Maccabees, Hasmoneans here, led by Jonathan. They're a minority, but in control, more or less. But there are a number of fractions. Some scholars say that part of this had to do with the frictions over there not being a high priest. Some scholars on the Seleucids especially say this was because the Seleucid king was unable to obtain an agreement amongst the Jews as to who he should appoint as high priest. Keep in mind the high priest was appointed by the king. The Seleucids still control and man the citadel in Jerusalem that militarily overlooks the temple, which holds also 20 of the favorite sons of the Jews, which was part of how the Seleucids were controlling them. Jonathan and his Maccabee clan, Hasmonean clan, they're holed up outside of Jerusalem at Mishmash. Meanwhile, the Seleucid Empire starts another revolt within its empire. This dating now is around 153 BC. Alexander Epiphanes claims the right to be the king. Of course, the current king is Demetrius I. Alexander is better known in history, and you may see him referred elsewhere as Balus. And he claims to be the son of the old Alexander IV, a previous king. And several countries recognize him as a legitimate right to that kingship, including the Ptolemies in Egypt to their south, as well as he has support of Rome. So he lands at a seacoast town called Ptolemais, which is south of Antioch. And the big garrison that's there of the Seleucid army immediately surrenders to him or goes to his side. In other words, they support him as being the new king. From there, these rival kings make a bidding war for the loyalty of the Jews and Jonathan specifically, the Maccabees, that is. And Jonathan uses this to his personal benefit and the personal and general benefit of the Maccabean clan, Hasmonean clan, if you will, as well as to the Jews at large. First, Demetrius I, who is the actual setting king, makes a type of peace with Jonathan and the Jews by sending a letter to them allowing Jonathan to move from where he was at Michmash to go back to Jerusalem and take charge and control things from there. He also is allowed to recruit an army, a full army from the Jews within Judea. The sons that are being held hostage in the citadel are released to their families. And he also allows the Jews to begin to rebuild some of the damage that's occurred to their city, to their walls, and to their temple. However, the citadel will still be manned by the Seleucids, and as well as some of what's called renegades, that is, renegade Jews that are not supporting the Maccabees. Jonathan has this letter read aloud then throughout Judea, so that everybody's aware that Demetrius has done this. Verses 12 and 13 of chapter 10 imply all the strongholds that were in Judea were abandoned. But the scholars in general say this is very much an overstatement by the author of First Maccabees. There's very good evidence to indicate that many of those strongholds were still controlled by a certain level of Seleucids, but even more so by these various factions in the Jews that were not supportive of the Maccabees. Historians claim that Demetrius I had done much to cause his own problems here. He made enemies of just about everybody at all levels in his empire. He treated his subjects throughout very harshly, and then when they began to sort of resist, he doubled down on it, making it even worse. And so there was a full-fledged revolt going on. It was not just an outside king. He had failed in war. Lots of Seleucids had died as a result of some bad conflicts that he had chosen to fight. And he'd even gone and tried to capture Cyprus and failed there. He had lost favor, especially with Rome. Alexander, that is the would-be king, counters Demetrius by making Jonathan high priest. Oh boy, what a change of events. Remember where we left off last time, these people have gone nearly a decade now without a high priest, which is hard to understand because the Jewish religion at that time required a high priest. So at what level of religion they were practicing, we don't know. Jonathan dons the vestments, and the book will describe some of those vestments and so forth, on October the 15th of 152 BC, during the Feast of Tabernacles, or what's may be referred in your writing as the Feast of Booths. This is most interesting that he would be named high priest or accepted at that time, because this is only 5 days after the Feast of Atonement. And the Feast of Atonement is the big feast that the Jews had, in which the high priest is the center of everything, because it's the high priest in that ritual that atones for the sins of all the people and goes into the Holy of Holies once a year for this very, very purpose. So why he delayed? Why is this delay of not appointing him as high priest preceding the Feast of Atonement is greatly argued amongst scholars, and they're all over the place in this debate. But for the most part, the debates tend to fall in the following categories. Most seem to reflect that it is another attempt by the Maccabees to make Jonathan and the Maccabee clan, the Hasmonean clan, fit into certain things that are already in the Old Testament scripture. And the one then that they argue this fits with is that the first holy day celebration that occurred after the exile, that is, after the Jews were exiled from their previous temple, was the Feast of Tabernacles. So since it's been 10 years or so since they've been able to do anything, maybe that's what's going on here. So a lot of scholars make that connection. Others will argue it may have more to do with Jonathan not being acceptable as a high priest to most Jews. Specifically, he does not meet the purity requirements of a high priest, in that he has led battles, he's killed in battle, and he's prayed and blessed people in battle. After all, he was of a priestly line. The Maccabees are and the Hasmoneans are a priestly line, but they are not a high priest line. So he does not fit the definition of where they normally would have chose their high priest from. So this is totally new and would not have been widely received. So the delay may have, as this group of scholars would argue, has to do, well, let's wait and name him high priest at the Feast of Booths. This will give us a full year for people to get used to him being the high priest and before he goes into his the key major role of asking for atonement on our behalf. Furthermore, many scholars argue that this was such an ordeal of him not fitting that role of high priest that in the Dead Sea Scrolls writings, there's a reference to a wicked high priest repeatedly, and it's Jonathan that they say he is referring to. The wicked high priest amongst the common room community was Jonathan. From other sources, we learn that the Seleucids, priestly class, also did not support Jonathan as high priest. A number of Dead Sea Scrolls also argue that it was this issue of Jonathan being named as high priest that drove the development of the Qumran community where the Dead Sea Scrolls and so forth are found, and that they simply would not worship under the normal temple worship if Jonathan was the high priest, and that's at the time they left. In an attempt to draw favor from Jews that did not support Jonathan, and to counter Alexander, the would-be king's offer, Demetrius, then the sitting king, sends another letter offering favors. This time, though, he does not address his letter to Jonathan. Instead, he addresses it to the nations of the Jews, the nation of the Jews. And in it, he makes a number of giveaways, you might say, to these people. He relinquishes control of the citadel. He also releases all Jews in his kingdom from slavery, anywhere in the kingdom, not just in Judea, without compensation, allowing them to live anywhere they want in his kingdom. He releases all Jews from official duties during holidays so that they're able to travel to these pilgrimages, such as this fall feast or the spring Passover feast and so forth, which has been a big deal because they were unable to do this. Furthermore, there were a number of taxes affiliated with all that, and he forgives all those taxes. In addition to that, he releases them, the whole Jewish nation, of several significant taxes that they had been having to pay. And finally, he even agrees to fund the restoration repairs to the temple, specifically from his own king's treasury. But the Jews do not trust, Demetrius, because of the things he's done in the past. And Jonathan's group then officially backs Alexander as the new king. The two kings then go to battle in late 151, fighting through the summer, into the summer of 150 BC. Historians tell us that Alexander's army, that is the would-be king, his army was badly routed in the beginnings of this war. But as he was pursued by Demetrius, Demetrius was killed in later battles, I think during that summer of 50. And then Alexander steps in and is named king officially, taking the title Alexander the First. And he's immediately recognized by Rome as the new king, as well as by other nations. For example, the Ptolemies, which is what was at one time the other half of the Seleucid Empire, the Egyptians, if you will, those kings unite in friendship with Alexander by having a royal wedding in which Cleopatra, the daughter of the king in Egypt, is given in marriage to Alexandra. So this royal marriage, tying the Seleucids and the Ptolemies back together in a royal tie. Alexander thanks Jonathan for his support during the war and gives him further honors and freedoms by naming him the highest to the highest status of friendship that a foreigner can have in the Seleucid Empire, reaffirming that he is the high priest, but making him also the military and political ruler of all of Judea. So thus, as we end this towards the end of verse in this class today and end verse 66 of chapter 10, as we end that point, thus what you have in one man in Judea at that time, we now have the Hasmonean clan with Jonathan at the head as the political head, the military head, and the high priest. So that's where we're at as of the summer of 150 BC. We'll continue our study of this Maccabees next week. Hope you all have a good Bible study.